Hello everyone. I'm glad to sort of speak to you all. I know it's been some time without a video, and as you all know, it's because I've been away and I've just gotten back this morning at around 5 a.m. So I'm a little bit tired, but I did want to get out the video as soon as possible. It's now 6 p.m. at night, so I've had some time to sort of relax and chill out and get some sleep. But yeah, I've just wanted to get into my trip and what went on and how I went with my Spanish. It's going to be a bit of a longer video. I've literally got, I don't know if you can see there, just a OneNote page, and I just jotted down, I think I jotted down like 3,000 words just on everything I experienced and everything I wanted to speak about. I'm splitting it up into 3 different sections, the 3 countries I went to, which I'll get onto soon. And I'm just going to speak about my time in each one and the places I went to. And as I said, my experience overall. So I spent, I think it was around 100 days all up in South America. As I said, had a great time. It was the time of my life, so much fun, so many memories. I'm glad I'm back home now. It does get pretty draining traveling for a long amount of time, but yeah, I'm so excited to sort of share everything with you. I know I said I was going to do some videos while I was over there, but I just got caught up in it all, and it's quite hard when you're doing so many things, meeting so many people. So I just thought I would just focus on enjoying myself and having a great trip, which I did, and I think that was the right decision. But yeah, no, I'm looking forward to reading through all my dot points I've got here and sharing everything. So we'll get into it. Okay, so let's start off. So as a lot of you would be aware, I started off my trip in Buenos Aires, which was pretty easy to fly into. I just went Melbourne to Santiago, which was about 13 hours, and then went to Buenos Aires from there, which was another 2 hours, which I know probably seems like a lot if you're from Europe or the USA as well. But for me, myself from Melbourne, it's not too bad for an international journey, so that wasn't too bad. But yeah, I obviously had some nerves going in. Also, apologies if I keep looking down. I've just made so many notes, as I said, so I'm going to be reading them sometimes. But yes, had some nerves going in. Obviously, I was by myself, which always makes it a bit more nerve-wracking. But you're going into a place you've never been before. You don't really know how everything works and how everything operates, but most of the time it's just in your head. And if you're a semi-switched-on person with a bit of common sense, you'll usually be fine, I think, depending on the place. But where I was going, I think that's sort of how it works. And yeah, just obviously on that, you hear about the dangers of South America at times on the news, and you know, it probably hasn't got the best rap all up for safety, so I think that played into it a bit as well. But yeah, that's just part of it, I guess. And yeah, as I said, if you're a switched on person, I think you'll be fine, especially in Buenos Aires, as I'll get onto in a bit. So yeah, it took me a few weeks to settle into the trip, being like social and interacting with people. Definitely a shock to the system. But I ended up spending 1.5 weeks in Buenos Aires. I loved it. I think out of all the places I went, it was probably the only city I could genuinely see myself living in one day. Yeah, it had that European flair to it, but it was also Latin America at the same time. It was really sort of a mixture of those 2 cultures, I think, in some way or another, but it was its own unique city as well. But I loved it. It was really developed, and yeah, it was a super nice city to walk around. In terms of safety, I never really felt unsafe during the day at all. I felt like I could walk around anywhere, and then at night it was just sort of use common sense. Just get Ubers home when you can. Ubers, they were very cheap over there, which was super handy. Even if you've got a half an hour Uber, sometimes it would only cost like 8 to 10 USD equivalent. So it's just worth doing. If you don't know the area well, just get an Uber. It's not hard. So you can take measures like that to reduce it a bit. But yeah, during the day I was walking around. I was able to just wander with my headphones in and didn't feel unsafe at all. There was plenty of people around. And big police presence I felt as well. So no, it was a great place to start. And once I settled in, I really started to enjoy it. I sort of had a little routine going where there was this ecological park. I think that's what it was called. And that was like a 6-kilometer loop. I like it because I like doing exercise and getting out in nature. And this was quite close to the city. It wasn't far at all. I could just usually walk there wherever I was staying. I stayed in a few hostels while I was there. And I would wake up in the morning, usually go for a run, just do one. I'm not a very good runner, so just one loop of that. and then I'd get a freshly made orange juice and a coffee afterwards. And it was really nice. I loved it. It was a great way to start the day. In terms of my Spanish at this point in the trip, I felt like I was doing pretty well. Like I could definitely get by doing day-to-day things pretty okay. Obviously the Argentinian accent's a little bit harder for a learner to understand, but in saying that, I'd consumed a fair bit of Argentinian content, so I don't think the accent was too much of a struggle for me. But it was cool to just start using the language nevertheless. Obviously, I was still getting my confidence up as well. I was probably better than what people thought I was, due to, I was a bit shy. I was still settling in. It was still a lot for me just traveling over here. I wasn't really thinking about the language yet. Obviously, I was using it every day, but that wasn't the big component. I was just trying to get by and sort of find my feet a bit. So that's where I was at with my Spanish in Buenos Aires. So after roughly a week and a half, when I say week and a half, I can't fully remember how many days it was, because this was 3 months ago and I didn't have an itinerary. I was just booking on the go day to day. So I think it was about 1.5 weeks, but it could be anywhere between 1 week and 2 weeks I spent in Buenos Aires. But after that, I went up to Iguazu Falls, which is a very popular tourist attraction, I guess you could say. And it's in the northern part of Argentina. So I decided to get a bus up there. The flights were pretty cheap. The flights aren't expensive to get there at all. But yeah, I thought a bus might be a better option, just because I thought it might be a bit more of a local experience and a bit more fun, a bit more adventurous. So I took the bus up there. It took, I reckon it was like 21 hours all up. So it was a fair old bus trip, but it was really cool. Just the experience of going the day before, getting my bus ticket, and just, I was the only tourist on the bus for sure. And it was a good experience. I think it was draining. I don't know how many times I would do it again. I only did a few overnight bus trips in the whole travel journey I did in South America, because they really do drain you. I'm not someone who can just sleep on the bus like some other people. But that was cool. I did that. Went to Iguazu Falls. It was cool. I don't know. It's just massive waterfalls. But yeah, no, it's a cool spot. I don't know if I'd recommend it for everyone. I found it cool, but it was a lot of tourists. I think it was quite pricey to enter the parks as well. So I did one side in Brazil and then one side in Argentina. So a day at each, which was cool. But yeah, there wasn't much else around the town. I thought there might have been things to do in the little town where it is. I forget the name of it. But there really wasn't much to do. It was just to see the waterfalls and then go. And since I wasn't really going to Brazil, it was kind of a bit out of the way. So I had to get the plane back to Buenos Aires after that. So yes, I got the plane back to Buenos Aires. I think I was there for about a week at this time. I was really loving it there, so I wanted to stay a bit more time. During this time, my confidence with Spanish, I think, was getting a bit higher. I was sort of having conversations at coffee shops with people serving me coffee, or just out on the street, or in the hostels as well. So that was nice. I was sort of being able to use my Spanish to meet people when they didn't speak English. So that was super cool. That was super cool. And I also did a few private lessons during this time as well. I think I ended up doing 3 lessons. I just didn't have much to do. I'd sort of seen a lot of Buenos Aires, so I was like, I've got 3 months, I can take it slow. I'm enjoying the city, just sort of day-to-day living. So I'll fill up my day with a few Spanish lessons. And it was good. I definitely learnt some grammar and a few other things, but they were draining. They were one-on-one private lessons. Maybe it would have been better if I was in a group. But some of them were 2 hours, and I just remember coming out of those lessons going, I am drained. So it really wasn't for me. I think if I want to do some grammar practice, I'm just going to figure it out myself. I'm sure it's beneficial. Me personally, I couldn't do that long term. It was very draining and definitely got a bit boring. An hour into the lesson, I just didn't really want to speak Spanish anymore. I felt like my brain was just exploding. In saying that, I still had, it wasn't anything to do with the teacher. I had a really enthusiastic teacher, but no, it wasn't for me. But I'm glad I tried it out nevertheless, and I definitely took a few things from it, in terms of grammar structure and maybe confidence as well, just helping me practice speak a little bit. So I don't regret it. But would I do it again? Probably not. It just felt like I was back in school studying something. So yeah, that wasn't my thing. And yeah, my final point here on Buenos Aires was just I was starting to feel like sort of the fruits of my labour start to pay off. As I said, I was meeting people and able to use the language to my advantage and sort of enriching my experience whilst travelling. So that was great to see. I don't think I had that in the first time in Buenos Aires. I was just still getting my confidence up and just believing I could do it. So that was nice. That was nice. So after this week, I believe it was, I had in Buenos Aires, I decided to go to Patagonia. I originally wanted to go to more of a southern part of Patagonia, which is a bit more famous than the part I went to, but it was a lot cheaper to go to Bariloche, which is where I went to. And I didn't really know much about the place. Like most of the places I went to, I really had no idea. I just sort of go off recommendations and what I think is a good price and would it work well in my journey. But it was awesome. I loved it. It was sort of a small city, I would describe it. Like, people still lived there. It wasn't just a touristy part of Argentina. It's well known for its skiing and its hiking. Obviously, when I went there was no skiing because it was summer, but I was able to do some magnificent hikes. They were really, really good. Definitely pretty breathtaking, some of them. I hadn't really seen nature like that before. Obviously, I'll put up some pictures of the hikes I went to, but they were, yeah, it was amazing. And we did a day. I had a group of friends I sort of met there in the hostel, and we did a day where we rented a car and did, I think it's called the Seven Lakes tour, and you go drive around the Seven Lakes in that area, and it was absolutely stunning. It blew me away a bit. I hadn't really seen nature like that. My expectations are usually quite high for anything nature related, just because I live in Australia and I spent a lot of times in the outdoors as a kid and even now. So it takes a lot to blow me away, but it definitely did at some points. When you got to the top of the mountains on the hikes, it was pretty breathtaking. Sometimes I just felt like I could sit there all day, and it had everything. Like, it was hot down the bottom, you'd climb up, and then there'd usually be snow at the top, or it'd start snowing while you're walking up. So that was super cool. I really loved my time there. I didn't really speak much Spanish. I was just in a group of other English speakers, so didn't really speak too much. Obviously, when I say I didn't speak too much, I'm still doing the day-to-day things in Spanish, ordering food or asking where the bus stop is or stuff like that, but I wasn't having any meaningful conversations or anything like that. But no, I loved it. It was so much fun. It was so much fun, and I'd like to go back to Bariloche one day and do some skiing. I think that'd be really cool. And then my final destination was Mendoza, which I came from Bariloche. I took a plane. Yes, a plane. I've still got it. This is 3 months ago, so I still have to sort of recall my memory of exactly what happened. And I stayed there for about a week because my next location was Lima, and I think they only had one flight a week from Mendoza to Lima. Otherwise, I would have had to go back to Buenos Aires, I believe, to go to Lima, or maybe to Santiago. I'm not sure. Yeah, super nice city. To me, it felt like a small Buenos Aires, I would sort of describe it, but it did have its own unique sort of activities to do. For example, it's well known for its wine. I'm not really into wine, but I did a little like wine tour thing on a bike with a few people I met, which was cool. And yeah, it was a nice city. I felt pretty safe the whole time there. Was in a nice little hostel. Had quite good bars in the nighttime. They had one sort of main strip, and any night they would always have plenty of bars where you could go and have a few drinks, which was cool. But in terms of my Spanish at this point, this is probably when I first started to really get immersed with the Spanish language. I met two guys that I ended up hanging out for probably 2-3 days with. One of them was from Chile and the other one was from Spain. And they both spoke fluent English, I would say, pretty much. So we would all speak in English, and occasionally they would speak in Spanish and I would join in Spanish as well. Their English was obviously a lot better than my Spanish, but it was just cool to sort of understand. I understood pretty much, not everything, but 95% of what they were talking about, which was pretty cool. But it sort of made a real difference when we started to hang out with some girls who didn't speak as much. Well, they pretty much didn't speak English at all, other than a few words. So when we would hang out all together, it was really cool because I could actually use my Spanish, and it was really useful in a situation like that. Because if you're in a situation with 5 or 6 people and only 3 of you can speak English, that sort of ruins it. So that was pretty cool to start using my Spanish and you know, I was definitely shy to speak up at times when they're having it, because everyone else was native Spanish speakers to speak up. I was, you know, definitely a bit shy. I sort of had to think about what I was going to ask and what I was going to say. But yeah, I got by fine, could pretty much understand what they were having conversations about, and I could sort of add my 2 cents in when it was sort of the right time and when it was possible, and I was able to have some conversations, which was great. As I said before, it's sort of, you start to realise that all the work you've put in, it's kind of paying off in situations like this, where in the past, I just wouldn't have been able to hang out with these people. Like, what would have been the point if you can't speak the same language and they can't speak any of your language? So then from Mendoza, I got that flight that comes once a week, and I went to Lima in Peru. I think I spent 3 or 4 nights here, and it was quite a shock at the start. Argentina it's quite a developed place, I would say, for South America. And I remember when I got like an Uber from Lima airport to my hostel, and it was definitely a bit eye-opening. I was like, this place it's not as developed as Argentina. It was definitely a bit more of a culture shock when I first arrived. And it's quite a full-on city. There's a lot of people sort of packed in. It's a massive city. I'm not too sure the exact number of the population there, but it's huge. This is what I was kind of thinking of when I think of South America in my head. There's a bit of chaos to it. It's a little bit more underdeveloped than other parts of the world. And I stayed in a place called Miraflores, it's a bit more upmarket part of Lima. It was super relaxed, super nice. It sort of reminded me of home a little bit. Obviously, that's where they put all the hostels and the accommodation, because it's a nice part of town. Safety, had no worries, and really enjoyed my time there. During my time there, some of the things I went surfing, just went on walks along. It's sort of next to this big beach that isn't overly nice, but it's still nice to just have the ocean there. And as I said, I went surfing, and you can sort of walk along the beach as well on the boardwalk during sunset, and that's super nice thing to do. And I sort of continued with my immersion in Spanish at this time as well. I met a Peruvian guy who was in the hostel, and he actually took me out surfing for a day, which was really cool, for a few hours. He was right into that, so we went surfing together, which was cool. And he didn't speak much English, so we probably spent sort of 2-3 days doing a few different things, and obviously just chatting at the hostel as well. But yeah, he was super cool. And yeah, it was the same sort of thing as what happened in Argentina. I sort of had to make friends with when I was using Spanish, and I sort of had no issues. I could understand 95% of what he was saying. When I speak one-on-one with people, like in a situation like that, I find I can really pick up a lot. I don't really have to ask that often for people to repeat what they're saying when it's one-on-one. And yeah, it's super easy. I don't really have to think. He was a super chilled out guy, so there was no problems making mistakes. And yeah, it was cool. I was able to get by fine for a few days with a Spanish speaker. So that was great signs. I was happy to do that. And I feel like situations like that just continue to build up your confidence and start using it more. And then after Lima, I was off to Cusco, which, what a city this is. It's full of culture, full of tradition, full of history. I didn't really know much about it before I went there. Obviously, I'd seen it on documentaries and all the history of the people that used to live there and that sort of still live in the area now. But no, I loved it, and I did a few things that I'll get on to talking about soon. But the first thing, I noticed was the altitude. So it sits at, I've just had to give it a Google because I forgot what it was, but it sits at 3,399 meters of altitude, which is quite high. I'm from Melbourne, it's just at sea level, so there's no real altitude at all here. So it was quite a shock to me. And I was actually quite unwell for probably the first 2-3 days there. And I wasn't too sure why. I just thought it was from traveling, which happens. Whenever I travel, I sort of say to people, it's once every 1 or 2 months I'll get sick. I think just because you're not sleeping the best, you're probably drinking a bit more than usual, your diet's probably not great. And I just thought it was one of those sicknesses that comes and goes. But I think it might have been the altitude, because I started taking these like natural altitude tablets they give you from the pharmacies there, and I picked them up. And as soon as I started taking that, I felt a lot better almost instantly. So looking back at it, I think it was just the altitude, and I was just adjusting to it. But it wasn't nice. It was 2-3 days. Luckily, I was in an Airbnb for 2-3 days, so I wasn't sharing a room with anyone, which was nice. I got an Airbnb for like 30 Australian dollars a night. So that's like 20 USD or something like that, which is pretty good value. So I just thought I'd had like a month at that point in shared accommodation pretty much. So I just wanted some alone time, and it worked well because I was sick. So I kind of needed that and my own space. But when I was there, I did a 4-day trek. It was called the Selkirk Trek. And we finished on the last day in Machu Picchu. It was really one of my highlights of the trip. We had a great group of people. We had a really good guide as well that was sort of from that area. He was indigenous himself, and he was able to tell us some incredible stories about the people who used to live there and still live there now. One of the ones that sort of stuck out to me was that, because he grew up away from the city with his other indigenous people he lived with, and he was telling us he hadn't seen a car till the age of 11 years old, which was crazy. I was asking him questions about it because it's obviously so foreign to most of us, a situation like this. And I was like, did you know what a car was? Like, how foreign was it to you? And he said, like, oh, I'd seen it in books and stuff. But then he hadn't actually seen one with his own 2 eyes until he was 11. But he was a super cool guy, and he told us heaps about the culture and the tradition of the people in that area and just Peru as a whole. And it was cool to finish on Machu Picchu, obviously. I probably don't need to go in too much about that. Obviously, a lot of people already know about it, and it's definitely pretty breathtaking up there. And in terms of the altitude on this hike, I think it was a good combination. I think it got up to 4,000 meters at one point, maybe 4,300. It wasn't too hard. It was definitely challenging at times, but sort of everyone in the group could do it. Like, it wasn't anything too extreme, but you can definitely feel it. It's one of those hikes where if you did it without altitude, it probably wouldn't be too hard if you're sort of a physically active person. But I'd consider myself sort of day-to-day physically active, and I was still huffing and puffing on some of those hills. Another hike I did was just a day trip, which was called Rainbow Mountain, and that was 5,000 meters plus of altitude, and that you really feel it. You get off the bus, it's about probably 5 hours away from Cusco, maybe 4, and you can feel it straight away, even just standing still. So it makes it quite uncomfortable. And same sort of thing, if it didn't have altitude, it wouldn't be that hard, but with the altitude, it really zaps your energy and just makes it hard to breathe up those hills. Ended up spending Christmas and New Year's at Cusco with a combination of people I've met from meeting other people and some people from the hike I did, because you obviously get to know them quite well over like 4 days. I loved that part. That was honestly probably one of my highlights of the trip, that whole time in Cusco. And once I had sort of come and went from Cusco a few times doing the hikes and having Christmas and New Year's there, a few of us went to Pisac, which was about maybe an hour away in a colectivo. And a colectivo is like a small bus. It's super cheap, usually just with locals, and it usually costs like $2 to go an hour. When you're in your own little bus, there's probably like 15 people on the bus or so. Went there for 2 nights. It was definitely, there were a lot of, I don't know how you'd say it, like hippies, I guess, in this town, which wasn't really my vibe, as you can tell, but it was cool to see, and it was nice to go to sort of a little town away from Cusco to see how they live. And we stayed in a super nice hostel that was sort of overlooking the city, and it was nice to get away from a big city for a bit. So there wasn't too much to do there, but nevertheless, it was nice. And once we had wrapped up in Pisac, I was with about 5 other people, I think, at this point, and then that cut down to 3 of us that went to Wakachina. I think I'm pronouncing that right, I'm not sure. So we got the bus from Cusco, I believe, to Ica, from what I remember. And Ica's like a town right next to Wakachina. Wakachina's like, it's called an oasis. You'll be able to see off the photo, where it's a little town, and it's not even a town, it's just hostels and hotels, and it's a few restaurants, and it's just surrounded by sand dunes, and then a lake in the middle. And it's really cool to look at. It's just tourists there, but it was good fun. And we went sort of sandboarding one day, and you go around in this buggy, and the guys go really fast. Super fun, and it's really nice sunset just with a few drinks on the sand dunes, looking at the sun go down. So yeah, it was pretty basic. Didn't practice my Spanish at all there in Wakachina, but seeing Ica was also really cool. It was a crazy place, because this would have no tourism in Ica. We didn't stay a night there, but we just walked around there for a bit, got some food while we were trying to go to Wakachina and coming back as well. And there was so much noise. The tuk-tuks were everywhere. It really felt like a city that hadn't seen much tourism. Just very full on, but it was cool to see. And the last stop I had in Peru, it was with the same people I was at Wakachina with. Went to Paracas, which is a small bayside city. Like, it's not all tourism. There's definitely people that live there, but it's still quite touristy. And that was pretty relaxed. You can go see, we went on a boat trip to see the penguins and seals that were nearby, and then we did a day in the national park as well. It was nice. Like, it wasn't anything probably amazing. As I said, my expectations for any national parks or wildlife or anything of that nature is quite high living in Australia. So now onto my final country that I'll be talking about, since the final country I went to in South America, which is Colombia. So I spent, I think, a bit over a month in Colombia. It's pretty crazy to think of. I was just there in the Colombian coast about probably 35 hours ago or 40 hours ago, and now I'm back home. So that's pretty crazy to think of, but I'll start from the start. I started in Bogota. I flew into, and I was just looking for a different vibe to Peru for a bit. I wrote down a little note here. One of the main things that sort of surprised me was the difference between each of these countries I went to. Argentina was so different to Peru, obviously, and Peru was so different to Colombia, and Colombia is different to Argentina. They're all so different, and I think that's sort of slept on a bit. Before going over, I just sort of saw South America as like this one big place where maybe they've got some different food in different countries and all of that, but it's such diverse culture between the countries and obviously within them as well. So I was just looking for a different vibe. I loved the vibe of Peru. It was a lot of fun, but I just wanted a different change up after a month. So I went to Colombia, as I said, flew into Bogota. I was definitely a little bit nervous, not too much because I'd been in South America for some time at this point, but a lot of people do mention about Bogota and the safety issues that it may have. I personally had no issues in Bogota at all. It was definitely a bit rough around the edges for sure. You could definitely feel that vibe. There was definitely a bit more homelessness there than other cities I had been to, and it did just feel a bit dodgy at times, I guess, but I felt pretty safe. I was never bothered by anyone or anything like that, but sometimes you'd chat to people from the hostel and they would always seem to have a story of something that happened on the streets. So that definitely threw me off a bit, hearing all those stories that happened to people. But yeah, I can only speak what I went through, and I had no issues whatsoever, and I didn't really feel unsafe at any point. Obviously, I was using common sense and staying in the parts where you're meant to be. It's not the city, you just pop your headphones in and walk off. You have to use common sense and obviously get Ubers at night and know where you're going. Don't just go to random spots. So I think that's always a good way to minimize it. Obviously, anything can happen to anyone at any point in any place. So yeah, I feel like I have some good common sense. I've been to other sort of dangerous parts of the world that people traditionally say are dangerous. But yeah, I had no issues, so it was all fine in that regards. But it was a really cool city. They had really nice coffee shops, a lot of museums. I didn't really go to too many. I was pretty exhausted at this point after Peru, so I just sort of had some time to myself. The hostel I was at had a sauna, which was cool, so I sort of did that during the day. It was a good way to relax, and I just took it pretty easy. I didn't really do too much. I did a walking tour just to see the history of Bogota, a lot of history there. Did go to a few museums. No, that's wrong. I didn't go to any museums. I was thinking of the museums in Medellin that I went to. So yeah, I really didn't do too much. And one thing I have noted down in terms of my Spanish, Bogota was the first place I went to. The Colombian accents threw me off. I remember I got a taxi from the airport to my hostel, and I was really struggling to understand the guy I was speaking to, the driver. And I think it's just because I haven't watched much Colombian media on YouTube or on Netflix. There was a lot of things I didn't understand at times, but I could still sort of, I don't know how you'd say it, but like dissect the conversation, and we could always get there. You know, it wasn't too bad. And after a bit of time, after a few days staying there, it just got better and better, and I could understand it fine. But there was one phrase that really threw me off at all, like the street vendors, when they're like trying to sell you food, they always yell, "A la orden," which means at your service, or, I'm here to sell you something like that. I'm not exactly sure what the exact translation is, But I'd never heard this, ever. And I was just like, everyone's saying it. This is so weird. I've spent 2 years immersing myself in Spanish, and I've never heard this phrase. So you still get situations like that where it's like, you think you know so much, and then it's like, what is this phrase everyone is saying? But you pick it up pretty quick. It's not too big of a deal. And then I'll get on to Medellin soon, but yeah, by the time I got to Medellin, I was definitely able to communicate with people a lot better, pick up the accent a little bit from being there for a week or so, and I was able to have those conversations with Uber drivers fine and all of that jazz. So yeah, that was good to sort of learn a few phrases and just get used to the accent a bit. I think it's just because I wasn't used to it, and I found they spoke quite quickly as well. Then after Bogota, I got a 10-hour bus to Medellin. I was pretty sick of the night buses at this point, so I was like, let me take a day bus for 10 hours, which was a little bit boring because you're not sleeping during any of it. So time feels like it's going a bit slow, but it definitely made me a little bit less tired, and I sort of had the time. I was happy to do it, but ended up spending a week in Medellin with one of the friends I met in Peru, and me and him were there for a week. We didn't do too many tourist activities. We went to Comuna 13, it's like a barrio in Medellin, and they've sort of turned it into a tourist sort of activity you can do. And they have like restaurants and bars there and people dancing, entertainment. Cool spot. Like it was cool to see, and it's nice how they've sort of turned this barrio that was in the past quite dangerous into one now where it sort of obviously creates jobs for people, and it brings in tourists to the city as well. As many of you would know, Medellin's well known for its nightlife, its bars, its nightclubs, its restaurants. And I stayed in El Poblado, which is where most tourists, almost all of them, will probably stay. And not everyone, but a lot of people seem to have their own opinion on whether they think it's a good thing what's happening in El Poblado, or if it's not a good thing. I'm not going to comment about it because I don't know the issue, the in-depths of the issue at all. I don't really know much about it. But because it's a very westernized part of Medellin, some people don't really like it, and some people like it because it brings in tourism and creates jobs and all of that as well. From my time there, I personally quite enjoyed it. It was nice to just wake up in the morning and go to a nice cafe and have restaurants that you'd heard of before and that you could go to. It was a nice, refreshing thing to do, and it makes sort of life a little bit easier as a tourist. We didn't really do too much during the day. We went to a few museums, as I said, in the center of town. But in El Poblado, it's mostly just bars and restaurants and, as I said, nightclubs as well during the night time. So we did a lot of that during the night, as in go to a bar and have a few drinks and mingle with people and have a good time. And obviously if you do that, it's going to sort of push back your night a little bit later than usual. So we didn't get to do as many things during the day, but I think it was alright. We were kind of happy. We both had such an intense time in Peru. We were kind of happy to just take it easy during the day. And then go experience the nightlife during the night. In terms of safety in El Poblado, I thought it was pretty fine, especially during the day. At night, there was definitely some sort of sketchy people around, but it just comes back to using the common sense as well. Like, I remember I stayed in a few hostels while I was there over a week, and one was sort of 10-minute walk away. During the day, you'd most likely have no issues, but I did it once during the night because it's only 5-10 minutes walk. But it was I remember doing the walk maybe the second night I was there in the hostel, or maybe the first night, and I was just thinking I probably shouldn't be here right now and doing this walk. You sort of look around, there's not many people around, there's only a few people, and there's some sketchy people on the main road. So I remember the night after I just got an Uber, got a cab, and it was like a 2-minute drive, but it's obviously worth it. It only costs a few dollars, and yeah, it puts you at ease as well. You don't have to think about it. But yeah, no, it was a cool place. I enjoyed Medellin, a lot of fun. And yeah, we did go to some other parts as well outside of El Poblado, which was probably a bit of, I don't know if you'd say more of a real experience, because El Poblado is still a big part of Medellin. Like, it still is part of it, but maybe a less touristy part. Less touristy parts, I guess you could say, which was cool to see. Also met up with Joe there as well, Joe Sema. As many of you will know, I interviewed him on this channel about a year ago now, and he's got his own channel, which was super cool. We sort of got a coffee in the morning, and then we hung out with a group of people later that night. Just sort of chat about what we do and sort of exchange ideas. If you're watching this, Joe, thanks for that. It was good fun. Hopefully we can meet again sometime in the future for sure. And then onto my final sort of part of the whole trip, which is where I just came from 2 days ago, northern coast of Colombia. So I went to multiple places on the coastline, the Caribbean Sea of the northern part of Colombia. Started off in Cartagena and then I went to Santa Marta. Cartagena's the big city. It was a cool place. Probably wasn't my vibe, it was a bit full on, and once you got out of the touristy area, it did feel a bit sketchy. You couldn't really just go wandering around. Even during the day it felt a bit sketchy. Santa Marta, a lot smaller. And then I sort of stayed at these hostels that had their own private beach, kind of, which was awesome. And I was with friends a lot of the time, and we had a great time. We stayed at this one hostel that was the best one I've ever stayed at. You had to walk up this steep hill. I'll put a photo of it. It's probably the steepest hill I've ever walked up. It was ridiculous. It took like 20 minutes and we had all our bags and we get up there and it was one of the best views I've ever seen. So you have all these nice little hostels on the coastline that are super cool in these small towns. So I loved it. It was a great way to finish the trip. I was with some friends I'd spent a good amount of time with on the trip. So yeah, no, I loved it. It was great. It was great. Such a good way to finish. And it was nice because it just made me relax by the beach. I love the beach. And just going in the water. It was so good. So I think that was the perfect way to finish the trip. Thank you for everyone for watching. I got through all those notes I had on my computer. Sorry if I was rambling a bit there. I'm definitely a bit tired. My brain's not functioning as it usually would. But I think I said everything I wanted to say. There's too many things to sort of fit into one video. I could just keep going with stories and things that happen. But I just wanted to sort of touch on the main points about every spot I went to. Also, just wanted to say, there's one little note here. It's always, I think, a good experience to travel to parts of the world like this, like in parts of South America. It definitely makes you grateful for what you have back home. As I said, there's probably only one city I went to where I'd consider living that I went to, and that was Buenos Aires. And yeah, it just makes you grateful for what you have at home, in my home in Melbourne, in Australia. Yeah, going away to places that are less developed than where you come from definitely makes you reflect a little bit. So I think that's always a good experience that comes with traveling to these places. Just sort of grounds you a bit and makes you grateful for what you have in your own life, especially if you come from a developed nation like Australia. So that's always good to sort of think about that as well. And yeah, obviously the whole experience with Spanish, I think, just amplified it all. Being able to communicate with people on a day-to-day basis. It's, you know, I think if you told me 2-3 years ago you'd be able to go to these places, random parts of Colombia, Peru, Argentina, and just speak to the locals in their own language, yeah, I would have thought that's pretty cool. I didn't really think about it at the time because it was just like, oh, I can just speak this language. It's not a big deal, whatever. And you meet a lot of other people that can speak Spanish as well, so you don't feel too special, but who speak Spanish as a second language, sorry. So you don't feel too special when you're over there doing it. But I think coming back to Melbourne and looking at it sort of from a holistic point of view, yeah, it's opened up a lot of the world to me. So yeah, I think I'll go back in a few years. We'll see how we go. But yeah, it was so much fun. But thanks for watching, as I said. And I hope, yeah, everyone enjoyed the little summary. Thanks.